Beginning Perek Daled in Mishle, Shlomo HaMelech continues his discussion to the children, to listen to their fathers and their mothers, the musar, the discipline of their parents, to help them attain wisdom and all the wonderful things in the world. He begins with Pasuk Aleph, Shim'u banim musar av, ve'akshivu ladat bina. Hear, children, the father's discipline, and be attentive to know understanding. Here Rashi says that the father is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the discipline is the Torah. So here, children, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah, that's what's going to lead you to the ultimate wisdom. Ve'akshivu ladat bina, and be attentive to know understanding. The Vilna Gaon explains that the word Shim'u in the beginning of the Pasuk here is referring to three things. Number one, accepting, understanding, and listening. Same thing when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It has those connotations. To accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu as one, to understand and internalize it, and as well to listen. But the word Hakshivu in the second part of the Pasuk, not only does it refer to listening, but it implies a much greater concentration on hearing and understanding what's being said. So therefore the Pasuk is really enforcing the idea for the children to accept their father's discipline and to be attentive, to listen with great concentration and full effort in order to derive the understanding from the Chokhmah. Why? Pasuk Bet, Ki lekachtov natati lachem torati al ta'azovu. For I have given you a good teaching, do not forsake my Torah. Interesting that Shlomo HaMelech speaks here in the first person, as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu had said this directly. Here as well, the Vilna Gaon says that the word lekach is similar to the word lakachat, to take. This refers to the commandments that are to be taken and performed at their appropriate times. All the other mitzvot are lekach. But unlike other mitzvot, the Torah study, limud Torah, is something that is a constant obligation. And that the Torah tells us, the Mishle tells us, Shlomo HaMelech, al ta'azovu, do not forsake it even for a moment. When you have an opportunity to sit down and study and engage in the depths and the beauty of the Torah, you have to do so. You have to find your time every single day. Ve'agita bo yomam v'layla. No excuses. It's part of our religion. It's part of who we represent. And it plays an essential part in our being and well-being, in the way we raise ourselves and raise our family. Only through the study of Torah and the performance of the mitzvot can a person actually appreciate the beauty of its way. But the moment a person distances himself, chas v'shalom, from the Torah, and the Yetzer Hara makes it seem like it's a burden and a hardship, then it becomes more difficult to return. It's more difficult to do teshuvah. It's more difficult to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, Torati al ta'azovu, do not forsake my Torah, for only then you will see that it's a lekach tov, that it's a good teaching. And again, the word lekach also is based on the term likuchin. Likuchin means betrothal, to get married. Implores the Jew to sever his bond with God, just like a married woman remains faithful to her husband. We are attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu like a husband is attached to his wife. We will do anything in the world to keep that bond together, not to sever it. So if we have the opportunity to study the Torah, to make sure that that attachment, that chain links us, the Olam Va'ed, then that's what we need to engage in at all times. The Midrash actually says that lekach tov can mean good merchandise, and elaborates with a mashal of several merchants that were traveling at the sea with all their merchandise. And they asked one passenger who didn't seem to have any luggage at all, "Where's your merchandise?" And he answered, "It's hidden. But when we reach our destination, that's when I'm going to show it to you." And the merchant searched the entire ship, but didn't find anything of this fellow's merchandise, and they started to make fun of him. A short while later, the officials from the customs department of the new country they arrived in, they came aboard, and they impounded the ship's entire contents. And all the merchants, they disembarked at their destination, and they had nothing to their name. Meanwhile, the passenger who had been the object of their mockery made his way to the Bet Midrash and began teaching publicly from the wealth of his Torah knowledge. Whereupon, who walked in? All of these merchants who had nothing left. They walked into the Bet Midrash. And then they were taught what the value of his merchandise really was, as opposed to theirs. Chafetz Chaim explains that tov, kilekach tov, good, is a very subjective description. What may be good to the poor person is worthless to a wealthy man, whereas the rich man's good may be meaningless to a king. Similarly, people have varying tastes regarding what they enjoy and what they consider good, depending on their education, depending on their background. But it's Melech Malchei HaMelachim, the King of all kings, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in whose eyes everything he created is insignificant, who tells us that the Torah is the ultimate good. Everything that we think is good is really not good in the eyes of God. Only the Torah is Kilekach Tov. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu Borei Olam, who knows the full depths of the Torah wisdom, he can tell man that the Torah is absolute good. Ki ben hayiti le'avi rach ve'yachid lifnei imi. For I was a son to my father, a tender and only son before my mother. To demonstrate his admonitions against these horrible activities, robbery, immorality, Shlomo HaMelech recalls the love that his parents had for him. His parents displayed tremendous amount of love, but despite that, they still reproved him whenever necessary to give him the instruction he needed to hear. And Shlomo HaMelech is passing on that instruction to us. Interesting, though Shlomo was not his father David's only child, he was his primary child, because we know Shlomo HaMelech was to take over the throne when David passed away, and that ensured the continuity of the dynasty of David HaMelech. But to his mother, Bathsheba, he was literally an only son. And as a result for David's immense love and affection for Bathsheba, he also considered Shlomo HaMelech like his only son. And this confirms that the Musar Shlomo HaMelech received from his father was very precious. For a father will discipline his children, all the more so the child who is most beloved to him, and for the one he reserves the most special and lofty concepts for. Pasuk Dalet, Vayoreni, Vayomer li, Yitmoch devarai libecha, Shemor mitzvotai v'hyeh. He taught me and said to me, let my words sustain your heart. Observe my commandments and live. David HaMelech taught his son Shlomo through personal example. For Shlomo HaMelech was able to observe how David fulfilled the Torah's precepts and laws throughout his life. In addition to being a role model, David also said to me, to Shlomo, meaning he taught his son verbally, says the Malbim. The Pasuk tells us, Haniglot lanu ulvanenu ad olam, that certain things that are done in public, in the open, are displayed not only for us, but as well for our children as well. The obligation we parents have to teach our children the right way is so profound and so unique, because our children look at us and watch us and idolize us, and they mimic every action that we do. And Shlomo HaMelech is saying right now, my father made this a part of his life. He said to me, he told me verbally things I needed to do, and I listened attentively, and I focused, because to me, my father represented what it truly meant to be not only Melech Israel, but a true Aved Hashem. Yitmoch devarai libecha, shemor mitzvotai v'hyeh. Let my words sustain your heart, observe my commandments and live. The Vilna Gaon says a person may mistakenly assume that since the mitzvot are so valuable, you should just concentrate on the mitzvot instead of learning Torah. And to remove that idea, that notion, the Torah study really has no independent value from just the method or the vehicle to learn the commandments, Shlomo HaMelech refers to the Torah as something which sustains the heart, the driving force of the body. And that serves as the key, the vehicle of man's spiritual diet. Just like bread is the staple of our own sustenance, just as the body must be nourished constantly, so too the study of Torah needs to be constant. The commandments are just the spice dishes, the herbs, of which one partakes intermittently. Additives, it's good. It makes the meal better. But the Torah study is the key, is the ikar. and therefore let my words support your heart. First, to study the words of the Torah, which will sustain your heart, and only afterwards, shemor mitzvotai v'chayeh. Only afterwards, keep my commandments at their proper time and live. Keneh chokhmah, keneh bina, al tishkach ve'al tet meim refi. Do not forget and do not stray from the words of my mouth. The word keneh, acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Do not forget, do not stray from the words of my mouth. Keneh can also mean to buy. In Masechet Brachot, in its discussion of dreams, the symbolism of dreams, it states that a person who sees the word acquire, liknot, keneh, in his dream, should anticipate the acquisition of chokhmah. Just like our pasuk here states, keneh chokhmah, acquire wisdom. That the word keneh echoes another statement. Da kaneh ma haser, da lo kaneh ma kaneh. The Gemara Masechet Nedarim says, if a person acquires it, which is referring to wisdom, what does he lack? He has everything. But if one fails to acquire it, what does he possess? He has nothing. In the use in this pasuk, keneh indicates that if one cannot find someone willing to teach him Torah free of charge, then he needs to be ready and prepared to hire a teacher, says the Gaon of Vilna. Just as someone is willing to pay for food because food is a necessity of life, so too a person must be ready to pay for Torah, which is the food of the soul. We're willing to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to find our children teachers, private teachers, for math and sciences and language arts. But why is it that when our child seeks help and assistance in his Torah studies, in the studies of the Gemara and in the Mishnah and in the Chumash, we're hesitant? And we say, maybe it's not so important. You don't understand the Gemara, it's okay. Maybe when you're older. But when a person doesn't understand the math, I got to find him a tutor. Immediately start searching for tutors. But tutors for Torah, we don't rush towards it. Keneh chokhmah, keneh bina. You have to buy sometimes. You have to go and purchase the chokhmah if you can't get it yourself, if you're not able to do it yourself. It's the importance of Jewish education. How many people sacrifice hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of their lives for the children's Jewish education? These people deserve the greatest reward. Parents who sacrifice these dollars for the sake of their child's spiritual well-being, these people need to be put on a pedestal. These people need to have a gold medal wrapped around their neck. It's so easy to ignore the spiritual thirst of people and say, it's okay, I'll save the money. I'll send them just to a summer Jewish camp and they'll get their spiritual fix. Absolutely not. They'll get no fix. It's not enough. The Torah needs to be driven in constantly, day in and day out. And if it means spending money, if it means spending extra money than what you already spend, and so be it. Because that's the life. That's what we need. You spend money on food, you spend money on Torah as well. Al tishkach ve'al tet meim refi. Do not forget, do not stray from the words of my mouth. Beware, says the Malbim, of forgetting the Torah, of leaving the Torah, either because you forget it or because you just give in to your Yetzer Hara. Pasuk Vav, Al ta'azveha v'tishmereka, ehavea v'titzereka. Do not forsake the Torah, and it will protect you. Love it, and it will safeguard you. It says the Mitzudot, do not forsake the Torah, and it will protect you from all obstacles. One who does not abandon the Torah, even when he's motivated by some other considerations, he's going to be protected. But a person who goes to a higher level and actually loves the Torah for itself will enjoy a level of safeguarding corresponding to the highest level of security. Countless stories of our fellow Hayalim in Eretz Yisrael, who before going out and engaging in brutal wars, not knowing if they would come back alive, how they clung to their Tehillim, how they clung to their Tefillot, how they had full faith, how they put on their tzitzit, besimcha, how they put on their tefillin before every single time they went out there. First-hand accounts, they swear to themselves that that's what protected them in moments where they thought they would not come out of there alive, that they would not come out of there unscathed. The Torah has an ability to protect. And if you really, really love it, if you're ehaveha, then v'titzereka, it's a much higher level of security. Secret Service security. Reshit chokhmah kene chokhmah, uvchol kinyanecha kene binah. The beginning of wisdom is to acquire wisdom. From your every acquisition, acquire understanding. Shlomo HaMelech says in Pasuk Zayin. The initial stage of wisdom is to learn from others and to study from a teacher, with a teacher, says Rashi. Uvkol kinyanecha kene binah. Once a person has absorbed the chokhmah from his teachers, he should use now his deductive powers to now derive the reason for what he has learned and seek new applications of the wisdom. The Gemara Masechet Gitin relates, the man Isi ben Yehuda praised Rabbi Akiva as being an otzar balum, a storehouse with compartments. And Rashi there explains that Rabbi Akiva's approach to the study and teaching of Torah was similar to one who enters a field and harvests barley, wheat, peas, and beans. As he harvests, he places all of these varieties in the basket and assorts them in a separate bin when he comes home. Same, Rabbi Akiva absorbed awe and reviewed his teacher's lessons, both in the Torah, in the Halacha, in the Midrash, and even in the Agadic story portion. And only when he began teaching Torah to others did he classify these teachings into distinct categories of knowledge. Agadot, Halachot, Sifra, Sifrei. To why? In order to make it easier, to facilitate his students' comprehension, just like different varieties of food are divided in a storehouse. Rabbeinu Bechaye renders his pasuk the following way, and he says, as with all your possessions acquire understanding, first and foremost, you have to acquire wisdom. But this acquisition is not the only thing, it's not the be-all end-all, without also acquiring understanding. Wisdom without understanding is not enough. Therefore, a person has to use kol kinyanecha. A person has to use all of his possessions if necessary to acquire the understanding, because that is true wealth. Salseleha utromemeka techabedcha ki techabekena. Search for it and it will uplift you. It will honor you when you embrace it. The translation here is like Rashi, who says, review it over and over and over again. Examine the Torah that you study with precision, just like you were to examine the vineyard, the grapes in the vineyard, to find the clusters that are ready for harvest. Salseleha is the clusters. When you hold wisdom in high esteem, then the wisdom will exalt you. Salselea utromemeka, it will make you greater. The 6th perek of Pirkei Avot lists the special qualities merited by a person who studies the Torah lishma, for its own sake. And the first Mishnah there concludes, Umgadelato umromemato al kol ha'ma'asim. The Torah makes him great and exalts him above all things. Because Torah lishma, the study of Torah for its own sake, is characterized by an inquiry born as a result to uncover more and more of depth of the Torah. Therefore, this pasuk combines the student, the Torah student, to study with silsul, a quest for in-depth understanding, through which he will merit the exalted position which is reserved only for the people who study the Torah for its own sake. Titen leroshecha livyatchen, it will set an adornment of grace upon your head, meaning your words will be accepted and listened. Ateret tiferet temageneka, it will bestow a crown of splendor upon you. A Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar who is favored and respected by others, would do well to realize that he achieves this only because of his Torah study. So Rabbi Yosef would mention every year on Shavuot, brought down Masechet Pesachim, were not for this day, the day of Matan Torah, who am I? There are many Yosefs in the shuk, in the marketplace, from who I would be indistinguishable. What would be the difference between me and Yosef this guy, Yosef this guy? I'm Rabbi Yosef because of the Torah that I studied. Yosef ben Halafta, and the great Tanaim that we had. Shema beni v'kach amarai v'yirbu lecha shenot chaim. Hear my child, and take my words, and they will add years of life to you. Whenever Shlomo HaMelech speaks about his child, it's a term of love and endearment. It's because you are dear to me that I wish to correct your ways. And I want to add peaceful years to your life. Bederech chochma horeticha hidrachticha b'magele yosher. I instructed you in the way of wisdom. I led you in courses of fairness. One's goal in middot, in character development, needs to be to travel the path of wisdom. Bederech chochma. By adopting, the Rambam says, is the medium position, the middle position between the extremes of each character trait. By being generous rather than being miserly. There, the Rambam in Yechot Deot, he advises a person needs to avoid the extremes. He's always got to search for the middle course. Gives several examples there in the halakha. Shouldn't be quick to anger, but you should also not be passive. You should become angry only to ensure that the harmful behavior not be repeated. And that's why you should feel anger. One should curb eating except for foods that are needed for survival. You still have to eat though. You should aspire to have wealth, but just what's needed for a decent livelihood. We need to avoid stinginess and giving too much away. Only give the money that we need to the people that actually need the funds. The Rambam says that one should neither be overly jolly or too depressed, but one should always be cheerful and pleasant, the middle ground. And to achieve this goal, a person has to have hora'ah. Hora'ah is proper instruction. B'derech chochma horeticha. At times, however, may be unnecessary for the person to use a ma'agal, a course, a circular course, by veering towards one extreme. So a person who is stingy must force himself to be overly spending sometimes in order to bring himself towards the middle. If I know I'm a cheap person, then I have to now spend to the extreme in order to bring myself back to the middle. The famous Rosh Hashiva of Kelm, this is how he emphasized the concept of tikkun hamidot, the perfection of character traits. And when Rav Yecheskel Levenstein was a student there, they say that he was considered very shy. It's a shy talmid, a shy student. And even though shame and shyness is really a trait that we know merits Gan Eden, as brought down Perkei Avot, as with every other trait, it needs to be measured and balanced so it doesn't interfere with the other facets of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the prescription to cure his excessive shyness, the Rosh Hashiva taught him the following: that he had to stand up on a chair in front of the packed study hall and wind up the big clock hanging on the wall. We don't expect a person who's extremely shy to get up in front of the yeshiva and give a whole discourse or answer questions. But you have to move away from your extreme shyness. How are we going to get a child to do that? Simple. We're going to get him to change the clock. We're going to get him to change the time on the clock, wind up the clock. This is how he will get rid of his shyness. Sometimes, when we take this route, however, and we go the opposite extreme, we can get glued to the opposite extreme. And that's why we need hadracha, hidrachticha, b'magele yosher. I led you in courses of fairness, to be led, to be guided upon this path, so that this temporary detour is going to bring you back to the straight path. That's how the Malbim interprets his pasuk. I want to conclude tonight with a Mishnah along the same theme of shame. The Mishnah tells us in Perkei Avot, as I quoted above, Hu haya omer as panim lageinam uboshet panim legan Eden. An arrogant person goes to Geinam, but a shamefaced person goes to Gan Eden. Rav Yisrael Meir Lau, in his Sefer Rav Lau on Perkei Avot, has beautiful commentary here. What does it mean a shamed-faced person goes to Gan Eden? And he explains that after the Jews heard the first two of the 10 commandments directly from God, they asked Moshe Rabbeinu to listen to the others on their behalf because the experience was too overwhelming for them. And Hashem approved of the request. The question is, why did he begin by speaking directly to the Jews since he knew they wouldn't be able to bear it? And he answers that he wanted the force of his communication with them to imbue them with a shame of sinning. The pasuk says, so that his fear will be on your faces, so that you will not sin. Which teaches that shame leads to yirat chet, fear of sin, says the Gemara. The Jews acquired this midah of boshet panim, of shame-faced at Har Sinai, so that if a person is not shame-faced, it is known that his forefathers did not stand in Har Sinai. A person who is easily shamed will not be quick to sin. Even should he stumble, his feelings of shame will lead him to repent. It's told that Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai was stricken with his final illness before his death. His students came to visit him and were astounded to see him crying. Why, they asked him. He answered, that person faced with the judgment of a human king, whose power can be lost and whose decrees can be overturned, how much more should one be afraid when one has to face HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who cannot be overthrown, cannot be overruled or bribed? Not only that, he said, but there are two paths before me. One leads to Gan Eden, and the other one to Gehinnom, and I don't know which one I'm going to be led. Shouldn't I cry? He saw that his death was near. The students asked for a blessing, and he answered them, may you fear God as much as you fear people. Is that all? They wondered. Yochanan said, when a person is tempted to sin, he hopes no one will see him. People are ashamed to sin when their peers are watching, but not if they are alone, even though God sees all. Rav Zusha Vanipoli, the brother of Rav Elimelech of Lezhin, states homiletically that an arrogant person, when we say aspanim la Gehinnom, an arrogant person goes to Gehinnom, means that if someone is so strong-willed that he will not be swayed by evil who deserve Gehinnom, God may send such a strong person to an environment that is like a moral Gehinnom, in order for him to reach out to those who are suffering. On the other hand, uboshet panim le Gan Eden, a shame-faced person goes to Gan Eden. Someone who is weak, someone who is easily swayed, must keep away from the evil influences. He needs to sequester himself in a Gan Eden of good and righteous people. Interestingly enough, and when this will conclude, the Mishnah ends with Yehi ratzon milefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'lo avotenu. May it be your will, Hashem, our God, the God of our fathers, sheibaneh bet hamikdash b'mehera b'yameinu v'ten chalkenu b'toratecha, that the temple be built quickly in our days, and that you will place our portion in your Torah. Why is there a tefillah in the text of Pirkei Avot? The answer is that originally this Mishnah concluded the Masechet, and this was kind of like a closing statement. But why this particular prayer? The Rambam explains that after the Mishnah praises the attribute of shame, which God gave to the Jewish people as a priceless gift, it's only natural to pray, Hashem, you gave us this trait, so may you can build the Bet HaMikdash in our day. But other Mefarshim see the connection between this tefillah and the Mishnah somewhat differently. Our Chachamim teach that arrogance will increase the days preceding the coming of the Mashiach. It's brought down in Masechet Sotah. And the Mishnah's phrase of an arrogant person goes to Gehinnom, aspanim la Gehinnom, may be read as a prayer. Send the arrogant person to Gehinnom. Spare us the increase of ga'ava, of haughtiness in the times of Mashiach. And may the Bet HaMikdash be built quickly, with no need of an upsurge in arrogance. That you will place our portion in your Torah. But if arrogance is unavoidable, and we ourselves internalize a measure of it, let it be dedicated at least to the arrogance of learning Torah and keeping the Torah. According to the Maharal MiPrague, after the Mishnah explained that an arrogant person goes to Gehinnom, this prayer comes to explicate that two things save one from Gehinnom: Torah and the service of the Bet HaMikdash. And his commentary on this Mishnah, Rav Akiva Eger explains that this prayer expresses the hope that in the days of the Mashiach, when the earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, ki male'a haaretz de'ah, and the Torah will be the inheritance of everyone, we will no longer need to make use of arrogance to acquire it. And isn't that our purpose? We've been saying all along, to acquire wisdom. To acquire wisdom. It doesn't matter what middot you possess. If you are a person who suffers from anger, a person who suffers from shame, a person who suffers from cruelty, there's ways to be metaken, there's ways to fix, to rectify things. You're on one side of the spectrum, you got to go to the opposite side of the spectrum, as the Rambam says. But understand that you need to be led onto that path. You need to be taught that path. And whether it's come from your own self-study or whether it comes from listening to the Talmidei Chachamim. Rabbi Yechezkel Levenstein was one of the great sages of the last generation. He was probably a perfect child. But his rabbi looked at him and says, there's one thing that I need you to fix. You are Boshet Panim. You are going to Gan Eden already. But you have to be able to deal with the world. To be a leader, you need to put yourself back in the middle. And this is how I'm going to get you to fix it. This is how I'm going to get you to help your situation. You're going to go fix a clock. We all need to find our own clocks. We all need to find the areas that we need to fix. And more importantly, how we need to fix it. That's what's difficult. Many of us who suffer from anger know that we're angry, know that we get angry. But what are the methods that we're going to utilize to fix that? What are the methods that we're going to use in order to fix our stinginess or our levity where it gets too much? Our job is to search for those ways, to search for those methods. Saselea utro memeka, Shlomo HaMelech said, as we learned earlier tonight. Search for it and it will uplift you. And when a person reaches those levels, a person finds his path, he will be considered and looked upon in a very, very high esteem. Where everything, all he does, all he studies, all he preaches will be L'Shem Shamayim. The Torah makes him great, the teaching makes him great, the mitzvot make him great, and exalts him above all other things. Yehi ratzon milefanecha, Adonai Eloheinu v'Eloi avotenu. May it be your will, Hashem, our God, the God of our fathers. Sheyibaneh bet hamikdash b'mera b'yamenu. The temple be built quickly in our days. V'ten chalkenu b'toratecha. That you will place our portion in your Torah. Let's all pray that we find our portion.